Welcome to the Unionising Starbucks lesson from USA Call. This meeting is being hosted by Strike Map UK and supported by Hackney North and Stoke Newington CLP, Organise Now and Unite Hospitality. My name's Sarah Woolley. I'm the General Secretary of the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union, but for tonight I'm here in the capacity as a representative of Organise Now. Starbucks Workers United have had petitions filed for unions in around 200 plus stores, which is a massive achievement, and they will speak more about that shortly. But it's dead exciting to be here tonight with some fantastic comrades from across the pond. Questions will be taken at the end. We'll have about 15 minutes if speakers keep to time, and we'll read them out. And if we've got time, we'll bring people in to ask questions too. Please do use the chat in a comradely way. The behaviour statement for Strike Map events is on there for you to read. The meeting's been recorded and it's being live streamed, so if you're uncomfortable with your face being out there, please turn your camera off. I'm going to first introduce George Binnett from Hackney North and Stoke Newington, who was the brains behind the meeting. Who's originally from Boston. He has a long-standing labour movement activist and currently the trade union liaison officer for Hackney North and Stoke Newington Labour Party. George had the privilege of meeting striking Starbucks workers on the picket line this summer. I'm not going to say I'm jealous, George, but I really am, because I've heard there were some exciting picket lines over there. And that's helped inspire today's events. So over to you, George, without no further ado.
Okay, well, thank you very much indeed, Sarah, and thank you for the support of this initiative. As Sarah mentioned, I have a Boston connection, having been born in the city and even gone to university there in the late 1970s, early 1980s. And ironically, I have a sister who lives in Buffalo, New York, which in a sense was the cradle of the current unionization drive across Starbucks in the United States. Back in August of last year, I believe 3 stores members filed for official recognition ballots with National Labor Relations Board, and 2 of those ballots proved successful by late autumn of last year. And since then, this campaign has really taken off like wildfire. I believe there are now about 250 Starbucks stores in the US where Starbucks Workers United have won recognition ballots. The success rate is over 80%, and there have been numerous walkouts, the longest of which was in Boston over the summer, and we'll hear more about that momentarily. Just a word about the National Labour Relations Board, because we don't really have an equivalent to it in the UK. The closest thing, I suppose, would be ACAS, the Arbitration, Conciliation and Advisory Service. The NLRB dates back to the mid-1930s, and the so-called Wagner Act. It was during the period of the New Deal under Franklin Roosevelt that this measure, which at the time was actually seen as favorable to organized labor, created the NLRB. It has a rather checkered history, but I'm sure Kylah and Taylor will have things to say about it since the Biden administration began, because there has been a little bit of a shift towards a more, if you will, pro-worker stance than we've seen for quite some time. Now, I said earlier, 250 stores have seen successful ballots for recognition. That's across 38 of the 50 US states and the District of Columbia, that is Washington, DC. Unfortunately, that still leaves something of a mountain to climb for the campaign, since there are nearly 9,000 corporately run Starbucks. And certainly Howard Schultz, the chief executive, and the senior management of the company have proven to be stubborn and pretty nasty anti-union campaigners, about which we'll hear more. But now on to our speakers, who are Taylor Dickerson, who is one of the key figures in the strike action that took place, and That was at 874 Commonwealth Avenue, towards the West Campus of Boston University. And we'll hear about that 64-day strike. And we'll also be hearing from Kylah Clay. Kylah, my partner Amanda Bentham, and I actually met outside the Thomas P. O'Neill Federal Building near North Station in Boston, where she was one of the organizers of the protest outside the regional headquarters of the National Labor Relations Board. And that was during the Commonwealth Avenue strike. Kylah is, I think, still a barista at the Alston store on the outskirts of Boston, and has come to my attention actually before I met her, because I saw a video of her speech at the American Federation of Teachers conference, which coincidentally took place in Boston earlier in the summer. In any event, these young people are very much in the vanguard, if you will, of a resurgence in union organizing in the United States. And Starbucks is seeing by far and away the most successful attempt so far to build collective working class organization in this giant corporation. And I'm sure there are inspiring lessons to be drawn from their experiences over the last year or so. So I'm not sure in which order they're speaking, but over to Kylah and Taylor. And thank you very, very much for taking time out of your day to join us here in Britain.
Thank you so much for having us. We've been really looking forward to sharing our stories with y'all. I can talk a little bit about what it's like working to organize a major corporation under the current NLRA, the laws in America, and how they've changed and how they have not changed. As well as some of those challenges that we faced specifically with Starbucks. And Taylor is our strike expert, so I think she'll be giving a lot of really great stories and lessons from the strike that recently happened. So for background, I started working at Starbucks almost 2 years ago. I was in law school full time, and I was in the middle of like the Zoom school era. So I was feeling very kind of shut out from the community, and my local Starbucks was always just the most friendly faces, and I always wanted to be there. So I thought I'll start working there on the weekends. And it was about a year in when I first read the news about the Buffalo stores filing. And to be very upfront, I did not know what a union was, because it's not really covered in our education system. I can't think of any time in high school that I really learned about unions. I think I learned a very conservative, historical perspective of what unions have done for labor law. And I also went to undergrad and got a degree in politics and law school. And throughout all of that, I still never really learned what a union is. And it wasn't until I read about these baristas in Buffalo and started to really hear what Starbucks was doing, that's when I started to Google what is a union. Because Starbucks was really upset about something, and they were really backlashing against these baristas. So my store was the fifth one in the nation to file. And we were the first in New England to become a union. And the process was very difficult because Starbucks has a lot of money and a lot of power. And they will do absolutely everything in their power to stop us. So, as George mentioned, we have the NLRB here. And the NLRA, which is the law that allows us to organize, was enacted in the 1930s. And although it was seen as a favorable act for workers, it was also known to be a compromise. It wasn't what we completely wanted as workers, and it wasn't supposed to be the end-all be-all of labor rights. But unfortunately, where we stand in America, it has been the end-all be-all. So what that really means is we're operating under a set of laws that was created in the 1930s when we never had anything like a Starbucks. right? We were primarily thinking about factory workers. We were not thinking about billionaires who have, mega franchises. We were not thinking about Howard Schultz and his 9,800 Starbucks stores. So these laws have become really outdated, and it's allowed our employer to really use and abuse them to their advantage. So one of those examples is this process, this fight to unionize Starbucks. We only have 2% of Starbucks unionized. We have about 268 stores right now. And that's a really big accomplishment. I don't want to underscore that in any way, shape, or form, but it just shows how difficult it is to really unionize a company in America, because we have to go store by store, each individual location, one at a time. And right now, Starbucks wants to negotiate a contract with us, each individual store, one at a time. And when we know how long one contract can take, if you imagine us trying, if we were successful in getting all of these Starbucks locations unionized, we would never get contracts because they would draw it out forever. And it's very difficult because under the law, there's not a lot of support for us. And when there is support, it takes a long time for it to kick in. So, for example, one of the ways that this is also really harmful for organizing is, we've had a lot of employees get fired from Starbucks, and Starbucks can afford to do this. What they have in their favor is a very long legal process. And they have a lot of money, so they can sustain the legal process. They can challenge things and make it take even longer. And that hurts worker organizers because we can't afford a week without a paycheck, another 2 weeks, or months to years because we're waiting to be reinstated. So Starbucks can kind of afford to break the law and pay the consequences later because the immediate consequence is a greater payout for them. So we had, for example, 7 employees in Memphis, Tennessee, who were all abruptly fired. It's notable that they're all the people who were in the organizing committee at the store. So everyone who created that union and put the petition in for their store, they were abruptly fired shortly after filing, and they were all people of color. And it took a very long time in order for them to win their reinstatement. And we're incredibly excited that they did, in fact, win in the end. This was a major win for us, and we've continued to have more and more partners get reinstated over time. But the real problem here is that it took too long. They had to wait forever to get to that reinstatement. They have babies, they have children that they have to take care of, bills to pay. And they are also dealing with Starbucks, challenging their ability to even get an unemployment insurance. Like, they can't even get unemployment pay while they try to find another job or wait for their reinstatement. So it harms us in that short term. And that's their game. So the way that Starbucks has really been union busting us is by, either skirting the law, being very careful and cautious with how they abide by it, or just outright disobeying it and having us suffer those consequences to see if it's worth it to stall our union organizing. So when my store went through the process, we dealt with a lot of captive audience sessions where, we had our regional vice president come in. She did not like me. And, we had to listen to them tell us why unions are bad. And one of the biggest things I learned is that, your employer under the NLRA is allowed to basically lie to you. They are allowed to give you examples, but they can give you as little or as much context as they want for those examples. They can give you facts, but again, they can present the facts however they choose is fit. And the most shocking one to me is that they can give you their opinions, but under the law, they don't actually have to sincerely hold those opinions. They can lie and say, I think a union would be really bad for you, even if they actually believe a union is good. So that's what our employer is allowed to use as ammo against us. And it's very harmful because, as I mentioned earlier, I'm someone who did not have any understanding of what a union is. I really wish I could go back in time and ask myself a little bit before I heard about the Starbucks stores unionizing, because I would love to hear my definition of a union. But the problem is education is very inaccessible. Learning about what a union is and what it can do for you is one of the greatest challenges that we face. And so we're constantly fighting Starbucks with education and information, and that's the only way we win. But the challenge is that Starbucks has a lot of leeway under the law. So during these captive audience sessions, I really remember like my coworkers, I could feel the fear when we would hear something like, if you guys unionize, you won't be able to transfer stores, or if you unionize, your benefits might be taken away. Things like that really, like, of course, are going to scare people. But when I did more research, I realized they were all not true, or they were presented in a really false, misleading light. And that is what Starbucks is up to. They pay millions and millions of dollars for attorneys to help them basically skirt the law or violate the law and pay the consequences later. And it's really challenging, but I do think it's been incredibly inspiring at the same time to see just how resilient we've all been through it. There have been partners who have just gone months and months without a paycheck, partners who have been denied promotions that were rightfully theirs, partners who have lost hours, people who have been here for a long time, like 15-year partners who have been fired for something as stupid as being 1 minute late. New rules being reinstated or completely made up and applied at, at the whim of your manager. I mean, these are all the reasons why we want a union in the first place. And it makes me very glad that we have fought for that, because once we get our contract, we can really hold Starbucks accountable. But in the meantime, this is their ammo and this is how they've been fighting us. So I think in that, perspective, it's very inspirational to see how many stores have continued to put themselves up for that fight. People who have, put their jobs on the line, knowing full well that if you're a prominent organizer, if you're a public organizer, you're not going to be treated very well by your manager. And so I think that that's been a source of hope in a lot of ways, is to see more and more people, despite this, say, no, I want to join you. And that was exactly where my initial instinct came from to join this movement too, was seeing those partners in Buffalo being just completely attacked by all these corporate managers, these high up CEO people, and wanting to stand with them. That's what really pulled me into the fight. And it's, I think, really inspirational to see that it continues to pull people in. So I'll hand it off to Taylor, because Taylor was actually, her store, one of her coworkers reached out to me early into my store winning, and they said that they wanted to go through the process as well. And they ended up being one of the most badass stores in Boston. So Taylor, do you want to talk a little bit about your store?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, I want to thank everybody again, just for having us and putting this event on. So a little bit about my personal background. I didn't start working at Starbucks until February of this year. So I'm honestly kind of a newer partner. And I also, the strike was in July. We filed in March. So I had joined, like, the process kind of already happened. Like Kylah said, one of my coworkers had already reached out. They kind of got the ball rolling. They filed shortly after I got there. So like, I wasn't even a part of, signing the cards, starting the whole process. But when I did get there, I jumped in pretty quickly. So actually I was raised by two parents who were in unions. My dad is a railroader, which they've also been dealing with a lot of stuff in the US right now. And then my mom is a paraprofessional, so she works in schools. So as part of kind of the teacher and educator unions. So the thing is, though, like Kylah said, I knew about unions generally. I knew my parents were part of them, that they were a positive thing, but also didn't really know to the extent, how they could benefit you, how involved you could be. And I surely did not think we would be the longest strike in history when I started and got involved in the union. But so basically what had happened at our store to make us strike. When I started, we had a manager who was pretty great. Our store, got along really well. We still do. I think that's helped us a lot in this process. And generally, like, it was a pretty decent place to work, honestly. So then all of a sudden we had our union election June 3rd of this year. We won unanimously, and I got to be a part of that. It was all great. However, like within the week or so, that manager who was great was replaced all of a sudden by a new manager who was union busting, frankly. Like, we're pretty convinced that Starbucks strategically put her in there to kind of carry out some of the stuff they've been doing throughout the country with this union busting behavior. So, like I said, we ended up going on strike in July. We didn't even get her in place until, June 9th, I believe is the date. So pretty quickly you can see things devolved. So, we started experiencing these tactics we've seen happen across the country where one of our biggest things was hour cuts. So I am a full-time employee there. I was working around 38 to 40 hours a week just as a barista. And then when she came on, my hours were cut really significantly, like almost in half or more. I was getting, as few as 18 hours a week, which also was under our benefits threshold. Like, you have to be working at least 20 hours a week to qualify for benefits at Starbucks. And then a lot of my coworkers also were seeing dramatic cuts. And we mentioned before, this is a store on a college campus. So a lot of my coworkers are college students, and this is kind of a part-time job for them. They work either at nights or on the weekends. So, they were getting, say, 10 hours a week or so, and then cutting it further. But also there was this availability requirement that she was trying to impose. Essentially what that was, you needed to have at least 30 hours or 35 hours in some cases available per week to stay employed at that store, which, as you can kind of see, is pretty unrealistic, especially for those people who make up most of our store, who are also, students. So, we just kept having more and more instances pile up as the weeks went on. My coworkers were just facing awful things like discrimination, harassment, and then we were also incredibly understaffed. Like, our store was having maybe 2 people work the entire store. And Starbucks is an incredibly frequented store. A lot of people come. We have a lot of regulars. A lot of college students stop by, every once in a while to get their coffee. And we just did not have the staffing to accommodate that. We were having to skip our breaks. We were having to skip meals. We were having to just kind of neglect our cleaning. So that kind of also was a health and safety issue. And then generally customers were getting pretty frustrated because they would have to wait longer. They might have like their drinks messed up, just so many difficulties. And so after these things started piling up for quite a while, we actually reached back out to Kylah and we said, hey, let's have a meeting about this because we just can't take it anymore. And we're not really sure what we can do, but we know, we are now union. So we do have these rights that we can exercise, and we'd like to kind of explore that. So we had this meeting. We told her all of what I just explained was going on. And I just remember she was kind of shocked. She couldn't believe like all of this was happening and that we've been kind of just putting up with it. And so, we started to kind of throw around the word strike for the first time. We had talked about before, like we knew this was a possibility, like unions have gone on strikes before. A lot of the time in the US, I feel like it's mostly like teachers or healthcare workers in the recent past. or in the like way a distant past, it was, you know, traditional coal miners, things like that, railroad workers. So it seemed like a big deal, and we didn't necessarily take it super seriously at first. But we did kind of have this awareness of it and thought, you know, maybe this is a possibility. So as we kind of continued this conversation, we just slowly started getting more and more serious about this, and thought, oh, this could actually be a pretty viable option for us. We might want to seriously consider this. And so pretty quickly we decided, all right, this is what we want to do. And almost like overnight, I want to say, we brought it up to, oh, Kylah, you can talk about this too, but we brought it up to Kylah and said, actually, I think we want to do this, but you can add right now, Kylah.
I was just going to say, the way that Taylor describes going on strike and not really seeing it as a big deal, I think that's also how I would describe a lot of, you know, the earlier process too of organizing my store, because it was the same thing as, you know, I personally did not know that the coffee industry had not been represented by unions in America until just about that same year that we started the process. And so when we first started organizing, I had a lot of people asking me, why Starbucks? And I thought it was just a really weird question. Like, I just didn't understand why they were asking why I think coffee workers deserve a union in particular. And I just had never really connected the dots that we just were not a part of that story for a long time. So, and you know, Taylor talking about going on strike and not realizing this will be historic. We didn't realize until maybe a couple of weeks later, but I think that really encompasses so much of this movement. Is it's coming from a genuine want to make change, and maybe not even realizing that the work that we're doing is groundbreaking. It just feels like it's necessary. That's all I kind of want to add when I hear that, because it's such a humble thing to say, like, I just didn't know, I had no idea. And, you know, here we are, we've had a lot of I didn't knows.
Yeah, definitely. And it's also interesting because I feel like a lot of like the demographics of coffee workers and, you know, my store, Starbucks in general, is a lot of really young people, people that it might be like their first job or maybe their second or something. For me, it's like one of my first jobs after graduating from college. Also, there's a lot of queer people. There's a lot of people of color. There's just a really diverse group of people here. And I think that makes it all the more historic and all the more important, honestly. But I'll get back into the story of our strike a little bit. So I think the date was July 17th and or 16th, I guess, when we decided to strike. And then we're like, okay, we're going to do it tomorrow. And Kylah said, oh, okay, you know, there's a lot of paperwork and things that go into this. So, you know, that just also kind of shows our ignorance a little bit of, we did not know what was coming.
And then I think at that same time too is when we were like, and if we do this, when do we come back to work? And
right.
That was when we started to think, oh my gosh, no, I think it doesn't just end. Because before that, all of our strikes had been like a day-long strike or something like that. And we were like, wait, hold on, we don't just go on strike. Like, we need to make sure we have a plan. And that's when it started to get even more like, that's when we decided to do a sick out. They ended up all calling out sick the next day. So we had one more day to plan.
Right. And so it's kind of funny because we really did kind of throw it together all in that one day. You know, we just took the day off and decided to just get all the paperwork done, make a plan of what this was going to look like. We had to make a lot of pretty big decisions that at that time we didn't realize were big decisions. But we made all of those. And that next night, it was a Sunday night, we sent a letter to our district manager and our store manager, who was the one we'd had a lot of problems with, and said, you know, the next day we were going to start an indefinite strike. This was also a pretty big deal in and of itself because no other Starbucks store had ever gone on an indefinite strike. Like Kylah just mentioned, it would have been like a day, 2 days, 3 days, whatever it may be. And we basically decided we weren't going to have an end time. We were just going to do this until we made progress, and we had our demands met. So then that ended up turning into a whirlwind 64-day strike. So during this time, a lot of different things happened. We decided at some point, I don't even remember when, to have it be a 24-hour strike, so 24/7 strike, really. So we would have people at the picket line day and night. We had to create this whole system of having people sign up for shifts, make sure it was staffed, make sure these people had food and water. The weather was incredibly uncooperative. We had rainstorms and extreme heat, and then also extreme cold when it was night. Just so many unexpected things came up, and we kind of had to adapt to that and move on. So, things were constantly changing. We had to make a lot of split-second decisions, but there was also this sense of community and solidarity that came out of this at the same time. Like, I don't want to minimize our struggles because it was really difficult. We weren't working. We were lucky enough to have strike funds to cover our lost wages. We had both a national one and a regional one we were pulling from. So we were really lucky in that way. We also had just a tremendous amount of community support. We had folks who were, regulars at our store stop by. We had people we'd never met before who were just passionate about labor and politics, and they decided to maybe pick up several shifts at 2 a.m. It was just really incredible to see everything that came out of it. We also had a lot of politicians. We had a lot of media, news coverage. We had to learn in the moment, really, how to speak to media, how to get our message across. It was just incredible. And then also we did have some, moments that were fun and light, even in this really heavy time. And we did all these things called mega pickets. So basically, it was a day where we would put a call out and say, everybody who can come up to the line, maybe from noon to 2. And during that, we would play music, we would hang out, we'd have conversations. We had an ice cream truck one time. We had like a masseuse there once. We just did a lot of really cool things there. And really, it was kind of an act of community building, which was kind of surprising and also really exciting. We also got to interact with a lot of different unions in the area and, get some knowledge from folks who have been in unions for, 30 plus years, who've done strikes many times before. Some people who are also brand new like us, like Boston University graduate students, just started their union, or they're actually in the process of filing right now. But when they came back this fall, and they were hanging out with us and offering support, and we were all able to exchange stories and advice and things. So it was just really incredible. So then after this 64 days of absolute craziness, we basically had a moment, obviously it was really difficult. And we were just like fighting for progress. And finally, on day like 60 or something, 62, I'm not really sure of this timeline. We had this announcement made really under the radar from Starbucks. And what they said was they were changing the availability requirement, which was what had really impacted our store, especially with the college students. And they said, like, you can no longer require people to work, a certain amount of hours a week. And so that freed up a lot of our students, and they could basically keep their jobs. And also that would help people applying to the store in the future. They wouldn't have to have this tremendous availability and then also not get those hours as promised. So we saw this and we were obviously shocked and excited. And so this was kind of like the start of us saying, I think we actually won this strike. Like, I think we might be able to finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. Obviously we still had a few things we were hoping to work on, but we had also talked to our district manager, and we were basically promised that we would have conversations moving forward to change the things in the workplace that we were frustrated by and that we were concerned about going forward. So we basically all got to this place where we felt pretty comfortable ending the strike and declaring a victory. So we also had this whirlwind meeting yet again with Kylah, where we kind of sat down with the store and said, okay, here's the situation, here's what happened. What do we think? What do we feel? We had, this long conversation where we decided essentially, do you guys think this is enough? Do you feel comfortable ending it? And then what's our plan kind of moving forward to achieve the rest of our goals? And we all kind of came to this conclusion, like we felt comfortable and we were ready. We were going to keep working moving forward, but that's when we decided to end the strike. So that was really incredible. Also, just two more little side notes. During this strike, we also had a few people in the region. I think there were 6 total stores, including us, or maybe, 5 stores in the area. They were all pretty much in the Boston area or right outside. They decided on August 1st to have indefinite strikes that ended up lasting a week each. Basically, we kind of floated this idea before we'd even gone on our strike to strike on August 1st because Starbucks, as a nationwide thing, was rolling out benefits for only non-union stores, so stores that weren't even in the process of unionizing. And I can't even remember. Some of the benefits were like credit card tips. What were some of the other ones, Kylah?
Yeah, Starbucks was one thing is there's coffee master aprons. So if you ever go to Starbucks and see someone in a black apron, that means that they took extra classes on coffee. They denied that for us. We're not allowed to have that. We can't have an updated dress code. We will not be eligible for certain healthcare benefit expansions. Of course, the credit card tips, that's the one that gets us the most because it is the most frustrating. But noteworthy is that all of these things that Starbucks gave to non-union partners are things that the union has been fighting for and advocating for since we started this campaign. So as much as it sucks that, my coworkers and I are not eligible for those benefits right now, first of all, the law is on our side, and we expect that soon enough those benefits will be granted to us. But second of all, those benefits would not have been provided to even the non-union partners if it weren't for what we've been fighting for. So I think it's a union win regardless. I think it's just going to take a little bit of time for it to catch up to us.
Yeah, definitely. So that's kind of what inspired their strike in the first place on August 1st. But also, I think we can kind of take a little bit of credit for that as well, because they kind of saw, we'd already been out for, say, 50 or so days at that point, and they were able to decide, okay, this seems like a thing that's doable. They saw it happen, a few streets over in Boston and decided, oh, this is something we could do. And also part of the reason that they expanded their strikes to be a week rather than just that day was in solidarity with us. A lot of us are experiencing the same things at our own stores, even, today. And they decided they were going to extend it and kind of be out there with us, which was really amazing to see. And then all of this to say, I think it is great to have done this just to inspire people going forward. I think, Kylah mentioned this earlier, Starbucks is an incredibly wealthy corporation. They, keep profiting more and more as time goes on. And so we as one store didn't make too much of a dent in their profits, which is really what they care about at the end of the day. But, the more and more stores join in and feel empowered, not just to unionize, but, to take action in the form of strikes and other things like that, it's just going to show them how powerful we are. And it's going to hurt their profits, which will make them care in the long run. And so I think like we set the tone really for this, and hopefully moving forward, we can just get more and more people to join and maybe eventually have a regional strike or a national strike, which will really, I think, scare them for one, and really make them lose a lot of money. So yeah, I think it was a great start, and we're really excited about the future. Thanks.
I think it's back to you, Sarah.
Sorry, George, I was waiting to see whether it was you or me. Thank you so much for that, Kylah and Taylor. I mean, wow, just seeing the work that you've done and put in and gone from like 0 to 250 stores in such a short space of time. I mean, inspirational's not even the word. And I know that you've had some fantastic pickets. I was talking to some comrades a few weeks ago, and you were talking about like the glow stick parties on a night time and everything. There is so much that we've got to learn and be inspired from the phenomenal action and the work that you've done. And I did put in the link, you missed out in international strikes as well, because wouldn't that be amazing to get to that point? And speaking of international strikes, our next speaker is Brian Simpson, who is a phenomenal brother from Unite Hospitality, and he's going to talk to us around the work to organise Starbucks in the UK. So Brian, I can't see you on my little screen, but if you're there, please jump in.
I am here, sister. Talk about inspirational sister to myself, and following Jesus, Kylah and Taylor. You don't know how much what you guys have done has inspired us in the UK. Sarah can testify to this. Everybody on this call from Britain and Ireland can testify to this. You guys have lit a torch paper which will never go out. Like, whether you are in Singapore or in Japan or in Scotland, where I am, what you guys have done has really inspired thousands of workers, whether you're a barista or you're a housekeeper. And I represent workers across the hospitality sector. So from restaurant workers to people in casinos. My role as an organiser really is to give as much support, both legally and industrially, to workers across the hospitality sector. But there's only so much I can do without the incredible, you guys prove that it's actually possible. That's the thing, right? You guys have shown that it's actually doable. I am currently organising a hotel, which is a huge resort, 480 workers in Scotland. 3 times someone has come up to me and said that the reason they joined Unite was because of the Starbucks fight. 3 separate people, completely unrelated to each other, in different departments of this hotel, have told me that the reason they got involved, and by the way, I think their average age is about 21. They've never even thought about a union. It's you guys who've actually inspired that. So that, is a perfect example in a microcosm for what you guys have done. So all power to you for doing that. But as Sarah said, I'm from Unite Hospitality, which is only really 5 years old. Obviously, Unite is one of the biggest unions in the country, but we've only had a bespoke campaign for baristas and restaurant workers and hotel workers for about 5 years. And we started out with a few hundred members, to be honest. Now we're sitting at 27,000 members. We've totally exploded. And that's been because of small but incremental wins. Some of the stuff that Taylor and Kylah were talking about, everything from winning, better toilet paper to like a microwave in the canteen, like small wins that actually prove that we as a collective are stronger than any boss, are stronger than any, we make the profits. And when we come together to make that clear to the employer, they really can't say no. Obviously, in some cases, like Eric Schultz, they do say no, and they make you go to take action in 245 different stores. But frankly, that is more testament to the resolve that you guys have and how much you have campaigned for, you know, basic employment rights, for basic benefits. But I just wanted to give some examples of kind of cross, as Sarah says, international solidarity, because we've got this action, we've teamed up with the bakers, which I'm not just saying this to Sarah, is my favourite union. It's weird, Unite is not my favourite union, the bakers are my favourite union. I'll probably get sacked for saying that, but it is true. So we've teamed up with the bakers and Organise Now and Strike Map to really pull together an action on the 17th of November, which is really about international solidarity. I thought at first we could maybe do 5 or 6 different cities. We've now got people signed up to 32 different cities all across Britain and Ireland to take direct action, to speak to people, to give out thousands of leaflets at Starbucks across the country. We're going to be doing that in solidarity with your week of action. We're going to be doing that in the same week as Red Cup. So it's going to be such an exciting action on the 17th. So that's really what we're focusing on now. I've had some incredible calls with some of the Starbucks guys, hearing your stories and linking up with our activists. So we've got a campaign that we're about to launch called Baristas United, which is a cool idea because unlike in the States where you guys can unionise cafe by cafe, we have to do it across the whole sector at one time, because we've got, if you can believe it, we've got even more archaic trade union laws than in the States, where we have, if we have 5,000 workers in one employer, we need 2,501 members in the union before we can get a union contract. That's how backward our system is in Britain. So in Starbucks, where we've got, you know, over 6,000 workers, we would need 3,001 members to really force them into statutory recognition. That is not going to stop us unionising one cafe to the next, but it prevents us from doing it or focusing just on one employer. So the point is, we are hitting Starbucks, we are hitting Costa Coffee, we are hitting Cafe Nero, we're hitting Pret a Manger as well. So our 4 target employers is where we are going to be hitting on the 17th of November, as well as teaming up with the bakers to speak to workers in, you know, independent cafes, McDonald's, fast food. It's going to be across the whole fast food and cafe network, basically. Because, as I said, you could speak to a housekeeper in a 5-star hotel and they've heard of and they've been inspired by what you guys have done. So it's not just baristas. But I just wanted to give or finish on one kind of example. That hotel that I was talking about, the 5-star hotel, we started there 3 months ago. We maybe only had 20 members at the time out of 480. And their big issue was tips, right? So you know what it's like in the States. Jesus, you guys have got it even worse than we do in terms of what your minimum wage is as a federal wage. You rely entirely on your tips. And that's the same in Britain as well. The average wage of a restaurant worker in the UK is about £8.80 per hour. It's about, well, now it's about $9. That's including tips. That's how bad it is in the UK for restaurant and hotel workers. So tips are fundamentally important. So as I say, we started out in this 5-star hotel in Scotland, which I can name because we've now won the case. It's called Cameron House, and it is the poshest hotel that you could imagine. It has a helipad. It has very wealthy American tourists landing on this, you know, huge resort in Loch Lomond in Scotland. Beautiful place. But it's £600 per night to stay there in the cheapest room, right? They've got bottles of wine that are £3,000 and £4,000 for a bottle of wine. And the workers are still paid £9.50 per hour. They're still on the minimum wage. So their tips, as you can imagine, are huge. They're getting so much service charge collected every single week. What we discovered was that the company was retaining 15% of that service charge and putting it towards a Christmas bonus at the end of the year. Now, they weren't getting anywhere near the money that was being collected. And of course, if you left in November, you didn't get any of that money, right? So we gathered together hundreds of those workers on a collective grievance. We put it to the owners of Cameron House, and we made it absolutely clear to them that if they did not distribute that money to everyone who was owed it, we would go public. We gave them 6 weeks. They didn't do it, so we went public, and it was top story news in BBC. We made sure that the reputation of the company was hit. I have never seen a boss move so fast in my life. We had a meeting within 4 days. We had the full collective grievance of all the representatives from Unite across the hotel. And within 3 weeks, we had £138,000 paid back to the workers. £138,000. Some people got £2,500 put in their back pocket for over almost a year of unpaid tips and service charge. One of the most shocking but exciting campaigns that I've ever been involved in. And as I said, there were 3 people in that hotel who told me that the reason they joined wasn't just the tips that they were going to get. It was because they'd seen what the guys in Starbucks had done. They were inspired by it, and it told them, because their parents aren't in unions. You know, a lot of the people on this call, they weren't brought up in unions. It's Starbucks that's inspiring them. So I'll leave it there, Chair. I just want to say this has been an incredible event. I'm sorry that I was late. I was actually representing a group of cafe workers and ran here to join this meeting. But I'm really excited to be part of this. Get involved in the 17th of November. It's going to be an incredible international action. Thanks, Sarah.
Thanks, Brian. And I was going to say, we won't tell anybody that the Bakers Union is your favourite union. I mean, obviously, it's everybody's favourite union, but we're live streaming it, so it might get out there.
And it's being recorded.
And it's being recorded. But
Jared Graham is phoning me right now, like, what are you doing?
Oh dear, I'm not making any comment on that. Right, it's 5 to 6. We've not got much time for questions. We've not had any direct questions in the chat or through the link. I will just open it up for maybe one question. I know that's a little bit tight, but I thought it was more important to listen to the fantastic Taylor and Kylah. We let them run over a bit, Brian, whilst we were waiting for you to come in. I thought it was more important that we listen to their stories on what's going on over in America than kind of cutting them off to listen to questions. So if there's somebody with a burning question, speak now. George has got his hand up.
Thanks, Sarah. 2 very quick questions. First of all, one of the tactics Starbucks seems to be using, and other corporations in the States as well, is workplace closure. And I understand there's been a ruling in the case of one shop in Ithaca, New York, which has gone the union's way. If you could tell us a bit about that. And secondly, if you could tell us about the support you've had from Starbucks Workers United in relation to the SEIU, Service Employees International Union in the States. Thanks.
That is a fantastic question, and I think we'll let them come back and then we'll close the meeting, because I think we'll have covered everything then. So over to you, Kylah and Taylor.
Yeah. So the Ithaca, New York store was closed down shortly after they had won their union, and also shortly after they had brought attention to some other issues that were happening at their store. They were also one of the first regions or districts, I can't remember which one, but to all unionize. So every store in Ithaca is actually a union store. And shortly after they won, they were shut down. The store actually was officially closed for a certain amount of time, and partners were trying to negotiate an effects contract, which is a special bargaining contract where they are negotiating where those workers will go to guarantee that they'll still have a job with Starbucks. But we actually just had some really huge legal wins recently. And one of those wins was that the Ithaca store is going to be basically ordered to reopen. So they're making a lot of progress right now. The way that the legal system works here is it has to first be kind of, the claim is taken by the NLRA if they decide that they want to take that, and then it's brought to a judge. So each step is a big win, but this is a long process, and they have made they've made a lot of headway for this. So that's been a big win. As for the second component, the relationship it's not one that I'm too tuned into in terms of the relationship with SEIU and Workers United. Traditionally, Workers United is a smaller subset of SEIU, its own union, and it was predominantly for ladies garment workers. That was where its original union roots are founded in. But for us, because we're in a location where, and I don't know, pardon me, I don't know if this is similar in the UK, but we have like locals or joint boards. So just like groups of unions represented by a staff in that area. But we're actually kind of unique in Massachusetts and the New England region because we don't have a joint board. So our relationship is kind of like an independent union, but also not, like a hybrid almost. So actually all of the work that Taylor described with regards to the strike, that's all been done by Starbucks workers. Like all of us have been doing that on our free time to organize and plan this. A lot of us have no idea what we're planning. When we planned this strike, I can tell you I've never taken a strike training class. So I was kind of figuring it out with them. But it's really just been workers who are really, really determined to get it done. We do have support from our union, especially with the financial support for our strike fund. But it's been kind of fun to also do it in an independent way, working just more directly with our coworkers, because it makes it our union. I don't really feel the word "the union" makes sense when I talk about it, because it's really ours and it feels like we own it. And that's been a huge win, because Starbucks loves to tell us that the union's a third party. So when you can prove them that it's not that case, it's even sweeter of a victory.
Yeah, I just have a couple of things to add. Kylah summed it up really well. I think just it kind of speaks to the newness of our union, like the connections, we're continuously building them, and we're only becoming, more powerful as a region, and then that also translates to national as well. And I think it's really helpful to have people like us at 874 who have experience like this, like leading strikes and everything, because then we can take what we learn kind of on the ground, on the front lines, and then bring that to better serve our region and then our national unions. And so it's interesting because we're in it and also building it at the same time. So we're kind of doing everything all at once. But yeah, I think it's also great because then we can kind of lead that and make that into what we want. But Kylah, you can add too.
I was going to say, it's like flying the plane while we're also building it.
Yeah, I agree.
And when Taylor's store came to me, I know that they had never gone on strike, but we went through the process together, and now Taylor is helping other stores do the same thing. And I think that's a beautiful part of organizing, is just keeping it going.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it was great to see the local 25 Teamsters refuse to deliver products to the store in Commonwealth Avenue during your strike.
Thank you both for answering that question. And you know what? You're absolutely spot on. From the baker's point of view, I'm not the union, our members are. I'm just the proudest person ever to be able to be the general secretary of the union and to kind of elevate their voices. But everything we do should be worker led, and workers from different backgrounds and different economies and different sectors teach us every day about the different scenarios and issues that they're doing and dealing with. So thank you to Taylor, Kylah, George and Brian. You have our utmost solidarity, absolute solidarity with everything that you're doing, and keep an eye out for things happening over here because it's about to get exciting. If you're not already signed up to the Guerrilla Organising Day on the 17th of November, get yourself signed up. What are you waiting for? I mean, come on, right? You've sat here and listened to these amazing sisters talking about organising their workplaces. You need to get out and do a bit yourself. Sign up to Organise now, sign up to Strike Map UK because it's all kinds of stuff, resources, training and places where people and actions are going to be taking place on the 17th. Join to be a guerrilla organiser. Thank you ever so much for joining the call tonight. Thank you again to our fantastic speakers, and we'll see you on the 17th.
Thank you so much, all. Solidarity.
Thank you.